Tonight, my husband and my arrogant stepsister are clinking champagne glasses in the penthouse they believe they own, sneering at me as the useless freeloader banished to the couch. They have no idea that this so-called leech secretly owns the entire skyscraper beneath their feet. When the sun rises tomorrow, I will turn their lavish fantasy into their worst nightmare, dragging them from the height of luxury straight down into the gutter where they belong. My name is Alara Vance, and at 28 years old, I spent my Friday night on my hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn Cabernet stain out of a white Persian rug. The panoramic view of the Chicago skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, $1 billion worth of steel and glass mocking my current position. Behind me, the clinking of crystal glasses and the low, throaty laughter of a woman echoed through the open-concept living room. Julian Thorne, my husband, lounged on the Italian leather sofa with his feet propped up on the coffee table I had just polished. He was a creative director at a mid-sized firm, a man who curated his appearance as meticulously as he curated his Instagram feed. He was undeniably handsome, with a jawline that could cut glass and a smile that used to make my knees weak. Now, that smile was directed entirely at the woman sitting aggressively close to him. Monica Slade, my stepsister, had moved into our penthouse 3 months ago. The original plan was for her to stay for 2 weeks while her apartment underwent renovations. Those 2 weeks had stretched into a quarter of a year, and her boxes were still unpacked in the hallway, acting as tripping hazards I was not allowed to move. Julian, stop it. You are going to make me spill. Monica giggled, playfully slapping his arm. She was wearing one of my silk robes, the sash tied loosely enough to leave very little to the imagination. I stood up, my knees cracking slightly from the hard floor, and wiped my hands on my paint-stained jeans. To them, I was just Ilara, the struggling freelance artist, the unemployed wife who contributed nothing but clutter to their pristine lives. The guest room is ready, I said, my voice flat. I put clean sheets on the bed for you. Monica. Julian sighed, a heavy, dramatic sound that signaled I had annoyed him. He did not even look at me when he spoke. Actually, Alara, we were thinking, Julian said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Monica has been feeling really cramped in that guest room. She needs the master suite. The lighting in there is better for her. Content creation. I felt the blood drain from my face. The master suite, Julian. That is our bedroom. It is just temporary. Monica chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I have a huge brand deal coming up, and I really need the space to focus. You understand, right, since you do not really have a real job to worry about. I gripped the cleaning rag tighter. I am working on a commission right now. Julian scoffed. Hobbies do not pay the mortgage. Alara, Monica is actually bringing in engagement. Just take the guest room. It is cozy. It fits you. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. This was the dynamic now. I was the invisible maid in my own home. I watched as Julian reached behind the sofa and pulled out a bright orange shopping bag. I almost forgot, Julian said, beaming at Monica. I saw this and thought of you. It matches your vibe perfectly. Monica squealed, tearing into the packaging to reveal a Hermes handbag. It was easily a $10,000 purchase. My stomach churned. Last week, I had asked Julian for $500 to fix the transmission on my 10-year-old sedan, and he had lectured me for 20 minutes about fiscal responsibility. Oh my God, Julian, it is beautiful. Monica shrieked, throwing her arms around his neck. She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes glinting with malice. Isn't it gorgeous, Alara? Maybe, if you worked harder, you could afford things like this. She stood up to model the bag, spinning around, and her elbow knocked over her wine glass. The dark red liquid splashed directly onto the sketchbook I had left on the side table. My charcoal drawing, a piece I had spent 40 hours perfecting, was instantly soaked. "Oops," Monica said, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. She did not look sorry. She looked amused. "Well, honestly, Elara, it looks better now. More abstract. Consider it an artistic improvement." Julian laughed. He actually laughed. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I turned away from them, walking toward the kitchen so they would not see the cold fury rising in my eyes. I glanced at the screen. It was a private number. I knew exactly who it was. I answered in a whisper. "Mrs. Vance?" The deep voice of my personal attorney spoke on the other end. "The acquisition of the rival firm is complete. We have the leverage you asked for. Do you want to initiate the eviction protocols tonight?" I looked back at the living room. Julian was taking a selfie with Monica and her new bag, completely oblivious to the fact that the credit card he used was linked to a subsidiary account I monitored daily. "No," I said softly, my voice steady and devoid of the trembling weakness I showed them. "Not yet. Let them climb a little higher. The fall will break more bones that way. They see a broken woman when they look at me, but they are looking at a reflection of their own ignorance. My education in cruelty began 10 years ago, on the day my father died. I was only 18 years old when my stepmother threw my clothes onto the front lawn in black garbage bags. I remember standing in the rain, shivering, while Monica watched from the upstairs window, sipping hot cocoa with a smile that suggested she had just won the lottery. In a way, she had. They took my father's house, his money, and his legacy, leaving me to rot. What they failed to realize is that rock bottom is a solid foundation on which to build an empire. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress in the guest room, pulling my cracked, outdated smartphone from my pocket. To Julian and Monica, this phone was proof of my poverty. To me, it was the terminal to my kingdom. I tapped the screen, bypassing the cracked glass to open a secure server app. The logo of Aurora Holdings flashed briefly. I was not just a freelancer. I was the silent founder and majority shareholder of Aurora Holdings, the real estate conglomerate that owned half the luxury high-rises in Chicago, including the very building we were sitting in. Julian believed he was a rising star at a prestigious marketing firm. He had no idea that his firm was a third-tier subsidiary I had acquired 2 years ago. He walked around this penthouse like a king, boasting about the incredible employee housing benefit that allowed us to live here for a mere $100 a month. He thought his charm had won him that perk. The truth was, I had authorized it. I wanted to keep him close, to study him like a lab rat in a maze I had designed. I scrolled through the forensic accounting report sent by my team. The numbers were glowing red. Julian had not bought that Hermes bag with his salary. He had siphoned $15,000 from the company expense account, disguising it as a client acquisition dinner. He was not just an adulterer. He was a thief stealing from my pocket to spoil my enemy. And Monica, I switched tabs to investigate her background check. The rich influencer persona was a house of cards. She was drowning in $150,000 of gambling debt. The sharks were circling, and she was using Julian as her life raft. My mind drifted back to the day Julian proposed. We were in a small park, not a fancy restaurant. He had held my hand and told me he loved my simplicity. "You are not like other women, Elara," he had said, his eyes wide and earnest. "You do not need fancy things. You are manageable. I love that you are content with so little." At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now, I realized he was interviewing a candidate for the role of a doormat. "Elara, dinner now." Julian's voice boomed from the dining room, snapping me back to the present. I walked out to the dining room, placing a tureen of tomato bisque on the table. Julian glared at the steam, or rather, the lack of it. He dipped his spoon in and tasted it, then slammed the spoon down, splashing droplets onto the tablecloth. For God's sake! Alara! Julian spat, wiping his mouth with a napkin. This soup is lukewarm. Can you do nothing right? I work 12 hours a day to provide this lifestyle, and you cannot even manage the basic function of using a stove across the table. Monica smirked, bringing a spoonful of the soup to her lips. Oh, poor Julian. You deserve a hot meal after such a long day. Maybe Alara is just overwhelmed. Not everyone is cut out for domestic standards. I watched as Monica slid her foot out of her designer heel. Under the glass table, I saw her toes crawl up Julian's calf. He did not pull away. Instead, he leaned back, his anger softening into a lustful gaze directed at her. I am sorry, I said, lowering my head to hide the cold calculation in my eyes. I will heat it up. Do not bother, Julian grumbled, reaching for his wine. You have already ruined the mood. I picked up the heavy tureen, my fingers brushing against the ceramic. I felt no shame, only a terrifying clarity. I was counting the days. I was calculating the compound interest on every insult, every stolen dollar, and every betrayal. They thought they were dining at the table of a fool, but they were actually fattening themselves up for the slaughter. Privacy is usually a luxury I afford my tenants. But when those tenants are plotting against their landlord, the rules change. While Julian and Monica were out having a 3-hour lunch, I installed high-definition micro-cameras and audio bugs inside the smoke detectors and behind the abstract art in the living room. As the legal owner of the building, I had every right to monitor the security of my property, especially when I suspected criminal activity. I sat in the laundry room with my headphones on, listening to the live feed coming from the master bedroom. Just wait one more week. Babe. Julian's voice came through, clear and crisp. Once they announce my promotion to vice president at the gala, I will have the salary bump I need to pay for the lawyers. I will divorce Alara the next morning. Make sure she gets nothing, Monica hissed. I do not want her taking half of what you earn. She is a leech. Julian! We need that money for us. I watched on my tablet screen as Julian paced the room. Do not worry. I have a plan B if the bonus is not enough. I am downloading the entire client database tonight. Apex Marketing is willing to pay $200,000 for the leads. That is our nest egg. We can kick Alara out and finally live the way we deserve. I froze. Corporate espionage. Julian wasn't just a cheater. He was about to commit a felony that would destroy the very company he worked for, a company I owned. Later that afternoon, I slipped out to meet Mr. Sterling, the figurehead CEO of Aurora Holdings. We met at a rundown coffee shop 3 blocks away, a place where men in $3,000 suits like Sterling never went. He looked uncomfortable sitting on the sticky vinyl booth, clutching a black briefcase. Mrs. Vance, Sterling said, keeping his voice low. The board is ready. We have prepared the termination papers. Do we strike now? No, I said, stirring my black coffee. He mentioned selling data to Apex. Let him download the files. I need the logs as proof of criminal intent, not just incompetence. The gala is in 2 days. Let him walk into the trap believing he is the guest of honor. When I returned to the penthouse, the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Julian was holding an embossed invitation card. It is happening, Julian said, his eyes bright with greed. The annual gala. The CEO sent this personally. They are definitely announcing my promotion. I am going to need a new dress, Monica declared, snatching the invitation from his hand. Wait, I said, stepping forward. Julian, that is the company gala. Spouses are usually invited. I should be the one going with you. Julian laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Oh, Alara, do not be naive. This is a high-level corporate event, not a neighborhood potluck. The ticket is for one person only. Besides, you would not fit in. You do not even own a gown. But Monica is going, I asked. Monica knows how to handle herself in these circles, Julian replied dismissively. She is going as my Executive assistant. It is strictly business. I lowered my eyes, feigning defeat, but inside, I was thrilled. They had just engaged the final tumbler of the lock. Later that night, while they were asleep, I went through Julian's briefcase in the living room. I found a loan application. He had forged my signature on a mortgage refinancing document, trying to take out a $500,000 loan against the penthouse. The fool did not even realize that the deed was not in my personal name, or his, but in the name of Aurora Holdings. The bank would have rejected this in seconds. But the attempt alone was fraud. The next morning brought the final blow. I walked into the kitchen to find Monica rummaging through a box of my old things I had left in the corner. She was holding a small, tarnished silver compass, the only thing my father had left me before he died. "What is this junk?" Monica sneered. "It smells like mildew." "That was my father's," I said, stepping forward to take it. "Well, it is cluttering up my space," she said. Before I could reach her, she tossed the compass into the trash compactor and pressed the button. The crunch of metal grinding against metal filled the silent kitchen. I stopped. I did not scream. I did not cry. Something inside me, the last tether of hesitation, finally snapped. I walked over to the bin, retrieved the twisted, broken remains of the compass, and looked at Monica. She was smirking, waiting for my tears. "You missed a spot cleaning the counter," I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze hell over. Monica's smile faltered for a second, confused by my lack of reaction. She did not know that she had just signed her own death warrant. The mourning daughter was gone. The CEO had just clocked in. The morning of the gala felt less like a sunrise and more like the opening act of a circus. Julian stood before the full-length mirror, admiring himself in a tuxedo that cost more than my car, while Monica twirled in a shimmering crimson gown that looked suspiciously like a knockoff of a designer piece I had worn in Milan 3 years ago. I sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in my oversized gray flannel pajamas, clutching a mug of coffee like a lifeline. God, Ilara, you look like a walking depression commercial. Monica sneered, applying a final coat of lipstick. Can you at least try to look presentable when we come home? It kills the vibe. Julian adjusted his cufflinks, turning to me with a look of pity that was far more insulting than hatred. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp bill, flicking it onto the coffee table. "Here is $50, Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Order yourself a pizza tonight, maybe some wings. Treat yourself. We will be dining on lobster and caviar. But I do not want you to starve here all alone." I looked at the money on the table. $50 to compensate for my humiliation. "You should know your place. Ilara," Monica added, checking her reflection one last time. "Successful men need high-class women on their arm, not whatever you are. You are basically a waitress without the uniform." I decided to give them one last ego boost, a final meal before the execution. I let my shoulders slump and forced a wobble into my voice. "Julian, please," I whimpered, grabbing the hem of his jacket with trembling hands. "Do not leave me here alone. I just want to be with you. I can change. I can be better. Please, Julian." Julian brushed my hand off his sleeve as if I were a speck of dust. He smirked, exchanging a knowing look with Monica. "Oh, sweetie, you are desperate. It is pathetic." Julian laughed. "Stay here. Watch some TV. Do not wait up." The door clicked shut behind them. The second the lock engaged, I stood up. The tears vanished instantly. I picked up the $50 bill, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the trash can. "Showtime," I whispered. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text green light. Within 5 minutes, the service elevator opened. A team of 6 people swarmed into the penthouse: stylists, makeup artists, and hair experts who usually worked with Hollywood royalty. They did not speak. They worked. 2 hours later, the woman in the flannel pajamas was gone. In her place stood the true owner of the building. I wore a midnight blue haute couture gown that hugged every curve, embroidered with real silver thread. Around my neck hung the Aurora diamond, a rare blue stone worth $3 million. I looked like a queen prepared for war. I did not take a taxi. I took the private elevator to the roof, where my personal helicopter was waiting, the blades already cutting through the cool night air. We lifted off, soaring above the gridlock of traffic where Julian and Monica were likely stuck in their rented limousine. We landed on the helipad of the Zenith Tower, the venue for the gala. I bypassed the main entrance, watching the security feeds on my phone as I made my way to the private observation deck. Down in the ballroom, Julian and Monica were holding court near the bar. Oh yes, the penthouse view is spectacular. I heard Julian boasting to a group of junior executives through the bug I had planted on his lapel. We are thinking of buying a summer home in the Hamptons next. You know, just to get away from the city noise. Julian spoils me. Monica giggled, hanging onto his arm. He is such a provider. I watched the screen as a man in a gray suit approached them. It was the representative from Apex Marketing, our biggest competitor. Julian excused himself, patting his pocket. He led the man to a quiet corner near the fire exit. My security team zoomed the camera in. Julian pulled a small silver USB drive from his pocket and slid it into the man's hand. "It is all there," Julian whispered, his voice trembling slightly with adrenaline. "Client lists, future projections, everything. I expect the transfer by morning. Pleasure doing business with you," the man replied. I smiled, a cold, predatory expression. He had just handed over the evidence of his own destruction. The trap was not just set, it had just snapped shut. The ballroom of the Zenith Tower fell into a hush as the chandeliers dimmed. Darkness swallowed the room, save for a single piercing beam of white light that cut through the center of the stage. The murmurs of 3,000 guests died instantly, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies' voice boomed over the speakers, vibrating in the chests of everyone present. "For years, you have known Aurora Holdings by its reputation. Tonight, for the first time in our company's history, it is my distinct honor to introduce you to the vision behind the empire. Please welcome our chairwoman and founder." The massive double doors at the back of the stage swung open. I stepped into the light. A collective gasp swept through the room like a sudden gust of wind. My face, magnified on the 40-foot LED screens flanking the stage, was inescapable. I was no longer the woman in the paint-stained jeans. I was a titan. The midnight blue silk of my gown flowed around me like liquid armor, and the Aurora diamond at my throat caught the spotlight, fracturing it into 1,000 blinding stars. From my vantage point, I scanned the sea of faces until I found them. Near the center, close to the VIP section he had bribed his way into, stood Julian. Crash! The sound of shattering glass pierced the silence. Julian's hand had gone limp, his expensive crystal flute hitting the marble floor and spraying champagne over his polished shoes. He stood frozen, his mouth hanging open in a rictus of shock. Beside him, Monica looked as though she had seen a ghost. She blinked rapidly, rubbing her eyes as if trying to wipe away a drug-induced hallucination. I approached the microphone, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the stage floor. I gripped the podium, leaning forward just enough to let the silence stretch, tightening the tension until it was nearly suffocating. "Good evening," I said, my voice amplified, smooth and commanding. Tonight is usually a celebration of profit, but profit without integrity is merely theft dressed in a suit. I paused, letting the words sink in. I built this company on transparency, I continued, my gaze locking onto Julian like a laser sight. But recently, I have discovered that we have a rot growing within our walls, a cancer of entitlement and deceit. Tonight, we do not just celebrate, we purge. I saw Julian stumble back, grabbing Monica's arm for support. I could almost hear his frantic whispers even from this distance. It cannot be her, Julian stammered, his face draining of color. She is at home eating pizza. That is a look-alike. It is a trick, Julian. That is Ilara, Monica hissed, her voice rising in panic. That is your wife. No, Julian insisted, shaking his head violently. Ilara is a nobody. This woman she is powerful. I finished the thought in my head. Effective immediately, I announced, my voice hardening. Aurora Holdings is initiating a complete restructuring of our executive tier. We are also filing criminal charges regarding several instances of internal embezzlement and corporate espionage discovered in the last 24 hours. The crowd erupted into hushed whispers. Julian looked like he was about to vomit. Enjoy the evening, I said, a cruel smile touching my lips. For some of you, it will be your last night of freedom. I stepped back from the podium, but I did not retreat backstage. Instead, I walked to the edge of the stairs leading down to the ballroom floor. The security team at the bottom stepped aside. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide path through the center of the room. I descended the stairs, one step at a time, never breaking eye contact with the man who had told me to know my place. I was not walking like a wife greeting her husband. I was walking like a wolf closing in on a wounded deer. I moved straight toward them, the crowd shrinking back to give me room, until I stood just 3 feet away from the 2 people who had tried to ruin me. The music had stopped. The room was silent. All eyes were on us. The crowd parted around us, creating a circle of judgment that felt miles wide. Julian stood there, his face glistening with a sheen of cold sweat, his eyes darting between me and the hundreds of people watching him. He let out a breathless, strangled laugh, trying desperately to salvage his image. He took a shaky step toward me, reaching out with a hand that trembled visibly. Ilara, baby, Julian stammered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? Is this some kind of elaborate joke? Did you hire these people to surprise me? He tried to grab my arm, a familiar gesture of possession that used to make me feel small. Not tonight. I took a sharp step back, looking at his hand as if it were covered in filth. Do not touch me with those dirty hands, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. Step back, employee number 4092. The use of his payroll ID number hit him like a physical slap. He froze. Monica, realizing her grip on the situation was slipping, stepped in front of him. She tossed her hair back, trying to summon the arrogance that had sustained her for years, but her eyes betrayed her terror. Oh, please, Monica scoffed, though her voice was shrill. You think because you put on a fancy dress and rented a helicopter that you are suddenly someone important. You are still just a housewife. Ilara, who did you have to sleep with to get that? Save your breath. Monica, I interrupted, my voice cutting through hers like a knife. And stop pulling at that hemline. It is painful to watch. The stitching on that dress is clearly machine-made. Authentic. Versace does not fray at the seams like cheap polyester. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Monica's face turned a violent shade of red, and she crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hide the fabric. Before Julian could speak, Mr. Sterling walked through the crowd. The man Julian thought was the ultimate authority in the company stopped in front of me and bowed his head respectfully. He then turned to Julian, his expression turning to stone, and extended a black envelope. Julian grabbed it, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. A flicker of delusion returned to his eyes. Is this the promotion?" Julian whispered, tearing the seal open. "The vice president role. Read it." I commanded. Julian pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the text, and his knees buckled. "This is not a promotion letter. Julian," I said cold. "That is a notice of immediate termination for cause. You are being fired for gross embezzlement, fraud, and corporate espionage. What? No. No." "This is a mistake," Julian yelled, looking around for support. I would never steal." I raised my hand, snapping my fingers. The massive screens behind me shifted. The live feed of my face disappeared, replaced by high-definition footage from the hidden camera I had installed in our living room. The audio boomed through the speakers. It was Julian's voice, clear as day. "I am downloading the entire client database tonight. Apex Marketing is willing to pay $200,000 for the leads." Then Monica's voice. "Make sure she gets nothing. She is a leech. Julian." The ballroom erupted. Gasps turned into angry shouts. Flashes from cameras went off like strobe lights, blinding the two of them. Monica tried to cover her face with her hands, but the press was already circling, sensing blood. Julian looked at the screen, then at the angry faces of the board members surrounding us. The reality of his destruction finally hit him. He did not stand tall. He did not fight. He collapsed. He fell to his knees right there on the marble floor, grabbing the hem of my gown. Ilara, please," Julian sobbed, tears streaming down his face, ruining his expensive spray tan. "It was not me. It was her. It was all Monica. She made me do it. She said we needed the money. I love you. Ilara, I was manipulated. Please, do not do this to me." The crowd groaned in disgust. Even Monica looked down at him with pure hatred. "You coward," Monica shrieked, kicking him in the shoulder. "You said you had a plan. I looked down at the man I had once vowed to spend my life with. There was no love left, not even pity. Just a cold, hard resolve." "Get off my dress," I said, kicking my skirt free from his grip. "And, Julian, regarding the penthouse you are so fond of, since you are no longer an employee, your housing benefit is terminated. You are currently trespassing on private property." I had sent the command to the building's security mainframe before I even stepped off the stage at the gala. While Julian and Monica were being unceremoniously escorted out of the venue by my security detail, I was already moving the final pieces of my legal chessboard into place. They scrambled into a taxi, likely terrifying the driver with their screaming, and raced back to the penthouse. They were desperate to retrieve the cash Julian had hidden in the safe and the hard drives that contained the evidence of their crimes. They did not know that I beat them home. I watched from the shadows of the corridor as they sprinted toward the penthouse door. Julian's tuxedo was disheveled, his tie missing, and Monica was holding her heels in her hands, running barefoot on the carpet. Julian slapped his keycard against the electronic reader. A harsh red light flashed. "Access denied. Come on. Come on. Work," Julian shouted, slamming the plastic card against the sensor again and again. "It is malfunctioning, Monica. Try yours." Monica fumbled with her clutch, pulling out her card. She swiped it. The same red light mocked her. "He shut us out," Monica shrieked, her voice echoing in the hallway. "That bastard Sterling shut off the keys. Actually," a calm voice spoke from the other end of the hall. "Mrs. Vance revoked your access privileges personally." Julian and Monica spun around. My lead attorney, Mr. Henderson, stood there flanked by 2 uniformed police officers and a team of forensic accountants. He held a sheaf of papers that looked like a weapon in his hands. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, walking forward with a terrifyingly professional stride. "We have a warrant to search the premises for evidence of embezzlement. Furthermore, a temporary restraining order has been issued barring you from entering the property." "This is my house," Julian roared. stepping toward the lawyer. The police officers immediately placed their hands on their holsters, and Julian froze. "Correction," Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. "This is the property of Aurora Holdings. You are merely a squatter. And regarding your assets, as of 20 minutes ago, all bank accounts in your name have been frozen pending a federal investigation into grand larceny." Julian turned pale. "Frozen. All of it, every cent," Henderson confirmed. "Which brings us to the matter of company property. The vehicle you drove to the gala, the Porsche, has already been towed, and under the asset forfeiture clause of your contract, any items purchased with stolen company funds are to be surrendered immediately." Henderson snapped his fingers. A large security guard stepped forward. "The watch," the guard said, extending a hand toward Julian's wrist. "And the bag," he added, looking at Monica. "No," Monica screamed, clutching the orange Hermes bag to her chest. "This is a gift. It is mine." "You cannot take this. It was purchased with a corporate credit card," Henderson said coldly. "That makes it evidence. Hand it over, Ms. Slade, or you will be charged with obstruction of justice along with being an accessory to fraud." Monica looked at the police, then at the bag. With a sob of pure materialism, she threw the bag at the guard. Julian silently unclasped the Rolex from his wrist, his hands trembling so violently he almost dropped it. "What about our clothes?" Julian asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Our personal effects. We packed for you," Henderson said. He kicked 2 large, black, heavy-duty trash bags toward them. They landed with a dull thud. "Everything that could be verified as purchased with your own legitimate funds is in there, mostly old t-shirts and sweatpants." "This is inhumane," Monica wailed. "It is efficient," I said. They both jumped. I stepped out from the alcove near the elevator. I had changed out of my gown into a sharp, white tailored suit, the color of a clean slate. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, looking at them with the detached interest of a scientist observing insects. "Alara," Julian gasped, taking a step toward me. "Alara, please. We can talk about this. I can explain." I pulled a document from my blazer pocket and held it out to him. "Sign," I said. Julian looked at the paper. It was a divorce decree. "If you sign this right now, admitting to adultery and relinquishing all claims to marital assets," I said, my voice steady, "I will instruct my team not to press charges for the credit card fraud you committed when you forged my signature on the mortgage application. You will still go to prison for the embezzlement, Julian. But at least you won't be buried under federal fraud charges that would add another 10 years to your sentence." Julian looked at the pen I offered. He looked at Monica, who was shivering next to a trash bag. He looked at the police. Julian stammered, his eyes filling with tears. "I do not have a choice." "Do I know?" I replied. "You made your choice the day you moved her into my house." Julian pressed the pen against the paper, his hand trembling so violently that the signature looked more like a seismograph reading during an earthquake than a name. He looked up at me, his eyes wet and wide with a pathetic hope, searching my face for a shred of the woman who used to iron his shirts and listen to his complaints. I signed it. "Ilara, please," Julian whimpered, his voice cracking. "I did what you asked. Just tell the lawyers to go easy on me. We were happy once. Right. Doesn't that count for something I snatched the papers from the table before he could bleed any more self-pity onto them and handed them to Mr. Henderson without a word? Julian had just signed away his marriage, his claim to any assets, and his dignity, all in a desperate bid to avoid a few extra years in a federal cell. "You bitch," Monica screamed. She lunged at me from where she was standing, her fingers curled into claws, aiming for my eyes. She moved with the desperation of a trapped animal, but she never made contact. My security detail moved faster than she did. 2 large guards intercepted her mid-step, Grabbing her arms and pinning her back, she thrashed against them, spitting venom, her face twisted into a mask of ugly, raw hatred. "Let me go," Monica shrieked. "You ruined everything. You are just jealous because he chose me." I stepped closer to her, safe behind my wall of muscle, and looked her up and down with clinical detachment. "You are so loud for someone who is worth so little," I said calmly. I shifted my gaze to Julian, who was cowering near the wall. "Did she tell you she was waiting for her trust fund to kick in? Julian, did she tell you her family owns an estate in Connecticut?" Julian looked between me and Monica, confusion clouding his tear-streaked face. "Yes. She said her father is an oil tycoon. She said the money was tied up in probate." "She lied," I stated flatly. I ran a full background check on her the day she moved in. Monica was disowned by her family 5 years ago for stealing jewelry from her own grandmother. She has 0 assets. She has been surviving on maxed-out credit cards and predatory loans. She is not an heiress. Julian. She is a parasite. You destroyed your career and your life for a woman who has less money than the pizza delivery boy you told me to call. The realization hit Julian like a physical blow. His mouth fell open as the math finally added up in his head, the constant borrowing, the refusal to pay for anything, the urgency to get his hands on my money. His fear instantly mutated into blind rage. He turned on her. Smack! The sound of his hand connecting with Monica's cheek echoed sharply in the quiet hallway. Monica stumbled back into the arms of the guard, a look of shock on her face that quickly turned feral. "You lied to me," Julian screamed, his voice shredding his throat. "I stole for you. I risked jail for you." "You said you were rich. You are a loser," Julian Monica yelled back, lunging at him and clawing at his face, leaving deep red scratches down his cheek. A weak, pathetic loser. "I never loved you. I just needed a roof over my head." "Get away from me," Julian roared. "You are a cancer. Everything you touch dies. I wish I had never met you," Monica cried. They collided in a mess of thrashing limbs and screaming accusations, tearing at each other like rabid dogs. It was grotesque. It was pathetic. And it was exactly what they deserved. "Enough," I commanded. The guards pulled them apart effortlessly. Julian was bleeding from his cheek. Monica's dress was torn at the shoulder. They stood there panting, glaring at each other with pure loathing. "You two are a perfect match," I said, my voice ice cold. "Please, keep each other. You deserve the misery you are about to share. Now, get out of my sight." I nodded to the head of security. "Remove them from the premises. Immediately." The guards grabbed them by the collars of their ruined clothes and dragged them down the hall. Julian tried to resist, looking toward the gold-plated elevators reserved for residents. "Not that one." The guard grunted, shoving Julian forward. He pressed the button for the service elevator, the metal box used for hauling trash, construction debris, and dirty laundry. The doors slid open with a grinding noise, revealing a scuffed, dimly lit interior that smelled of stale beer and wet cardboard. "No, please, not this," Monica cried as she was shoved inside. "Enjoy the ride down," I whispered. The heavy metal doors clamored shut, silencing their screams. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the hum of the elevator descending, taking the trash out where it belonged. I turned and unlocked the door to the penthouse. The air inside felt different. Lighter. Cleaner. The stench of their betrayal had vanished with them. I walked across the pristine marble floor to the kitchen island. Sitting there was a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir, a $2,000 bottle Julian had bought with stolen company funds, intending to drink it tonight to celebrate his crime. I grabbed the corkscrew and opened it with a satisfying pop. I poured the dark red liquid into a crystal glass, watching it swirl. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that seemed to shine just a little brighter tonight. I took a slow sip. It tasted like victory. The heavy steel service doors of the skyscraper slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot in the silent alleyway. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the Chicago sky had decided to weep for them, unleashing a freezing, relentless drizzle that soaked through their thin, ruined clothes in seconds. Julian and Monica stood on the cracked pavement, clutching the black plastic trash bags that now contained their entire earthly existence. Julian fumbled frantically with his smartphone, his fingers slippery with rain and panic. He tapped the screen repeatedly, desperate to call his fraternity brother who worked at a hedge fund, someone who might let them crash on a couch. "Come on. Pick up signal. Please," Julian muttered, shaking the device. The screen illuminated his pale, terrified face, displaying a single, merciless notification service suspended by carrier. "I had cut off the family plan 10 minutes ago. Call an Uber." Monica shrieked, shivering as the rain plastered her torn dress to her skin. "I am freezing." "Julian, do something." "I cannot," Julian yelled back, his voice cracking. "The phone is dead. My service is gone." Monica let out a guttural scream of frustration and ran toward the main street, waving her arms wildly at a passing taxi. The yellow cab slowed down, rolling the window down just an inch. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing the trash bags and their disheveled appearance with suspicion. "The Ritz," Monica demanded, trying to sound authoritative. "And I need to charge my phone. Card reader is broken. Cash only up front," the driver said flatly. Monica froze. She patted her empty clutch. I have credit cards. American Express. It is the black card. Cash or walk," the driver said, rolling up the window and speeding away, splashing a wave of dirty gutter water onto Monica's legs. They had no choice but to walk. They dragged their garbage bags 3 blocks to the Regency Hotel, a place where they had attended galas in the past. They stumbled into the warm, golden-lit lobby, dripping wet, leaving muddy footprints on the carpet. The concierge, a man Julian had tipped $100 to just last week, looked up from his computer. His expression did not hold recognition or warmth, only a cold, professional disdain. "Mr. Thorne," the concierge said before Julian could even reach the desk. "Please leave. I need a room," Julian panted, leaning on the counter. "Just for one night. I will sort out the payment in the morning." "Your name has been flagged in our system," the concierge replied, not looking up from his screen. "You are on the global do not admit list for all properties affiliated with Aurora Holdings and its partners. We do not host criminals. Security is on its way." Humiliated, they retreated back into the cold. As they huddled under the awning, Julian managed to connect to the hotel's public Wi-Fi. His phone pinged instantly. It was not a message from a friend. It was an automated alert from his bank account overdrawn. Balance negative $42,000. Immediate repayment required. "We have nothing," Julian whispered, staring at the screen. "It is all gone. The fines, the legal fees. They took everything." A group of young clubgoers walked past them, laughter spilling from their lips. One of them, a girl with a smartphone, stopped and squinted at Julian. "Hey." "Wait a second," she said, raising her phone. "That is the guy from the news, the one who stole from his wife." "Oh my God, it is him!" her friend laughed. "And the mistress. Look at them, they look like drowned rats. The flash of a camera blinded them. Smile for the internet," the girl mocked. "Karma is a bitch, isn't it?" Julian shielded his face, but the damage was done. The image was already circling the globe. He turned to Monica, his eyes burning with a mixture of shame and hatred. "This is your fault," Julian spat, pointing a shaking finger at her. "If you hadn't needed that damn penthouse. If you hadn't been so greedy." "Me?" Monica screamed back, shoving him hard in the chest. "You are the man you were supposed to handle it. You are pathetic, Julian. You are a weak, Spineless loser who couldn't even steal. Right. Get away from me, Julian roared. You are a cancer. Everything you touch dies. I wish I had never met you, Monica cried. They stood there, screaming at each other in the rain. Two villains tearing each other apart while the city watched. Eventually, the cold forced them to move. They grabbed their trash bags, the plastic stretching and tearing against the rough concrete, and began the long, humiliating trudge toward the south side of the city. They were heading toward the crumbling tenements and the homeless shelters, the only places that would take them in. Far above them, 70 stories up. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse. The wind whipped my hair, but I was warm. I held my wine glass, looking down at the street below. From this height, Julian and Monica were just two insignificant black dots, crawling slowly through the wet, gray veins of the city, disappearing into the darkness they had created for themselves. I took a sip of wine. It was a perfect vintage. 30 days have passed since the gala, and this morning, a copy of Forbes magazine landed on my mahogany desk. The cover features a woman in a midnight blue gown, her chin held high, staring down the lens with unapologetic power. The headline reads, "The Iron Queen of Real Estate." It is strange to look at that photo and realize that the woman is me. I signed the final renovation checks yesterday. The penthouse has been stripped down to the studs and rebuilt. The tacky gold fixtures Julian loved are gone. The guest room where I was forced to sleep has been converted into a sun-drenched art studio. Every trace of Julian and Monica, their scent, their clutter, their negative energy has been scrubbed away by industrial cleaners and a team of exorcists. The air in my home finally tastes like oxygen again instead of betrayal. While I sit in my high-rise office overseeing a billion-dollar empire, my ex-husband has found a new kingdom. My private investigators sent me a final update this morning. Julian is currently employed off the books at a Greasy Spoon diner on the edge of the city. He spends 12 hours a day plunging his manicured hands into sink water filled with half-eaten food and grease, earning $5 an hour. He lives in a boarding house that smells of mildew and cabbage, sharing a bathroom with 6 other men. He has truly found the gutter he was so afraid of. Monica fared no better. The last report places her in a cheap motel 2 towns over, hiding from 3 different loan sharks. The stress has taken its toll. The influencer glow is gone, replaced by the haggard gray complexion of a woman who spends her nights looking over her shoulder. The final act of this tragedy played out this afternoon. I was leaving the Aurora Tower for a meeting when a commotion at the front revolving doors caught my attention. Julian was there. He was wearing a stained windbreaker and jeans that were 2 sizes too big. He looked 10 years older than he did a month ago. He was trying to push past the security checkpoint. "Please, just tell her I am here," Julian begged, his voice raspy and desperate. "I just need 5 minutes. We were married. She will want to see me." A large hand pressed against his chest. It was Frank, the head of security, the same man Julian used to snap his fingers at and call, "The help!" "Step back, sir," Frank said, his voice deep and unyielding. "You are on the trespass list. If you do not leave, I will call the police. Frank, come on." "It is me, Julian," he wheedled, trying to summon a charm that had long since evaporated. I can make it worth your while. You do not have a dime to your name." "Son," Frank replied, not unkindly, but firmly. At that moment, the automatic doors slid open, and I stepped out, flanked by my executive team. The wind caught my trench coat as I walked toward the waiting black limousine. Julian saw me. His eyes lit up with a terrifying mixture of hope and madness. "Ilara," he shouted, lunging forward against Frank's arm. "Ilara! Wait! Look at me. I am sorry. I will do anything. Just give me a job, any job, please. I am begging you." I paused for a fraction of a second. My assistants stopped, waiting for my command. I could have walked over there. I could have spat in his face. I could have laughed at his misery or given him a lecture on karma. Instead, I did the cruelest thing imaginable. I did absolutely nothing. I did not turn my head. I did not blink. I stared straight ahead at the open door of my car. To me, the man screaming my name was no more significant than the traffic noise or the pigeons on the sidewalk. He simply did not exist in my world anymore. My indifference was a wall he could never climb, a silence louder than any scream. "Elara, please." His voice faded into a sob as Frank shoved him back toward the street. I slid into the leather seat of the limousine. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the cold and the noise. "Where to?" Ms. Vance, the driver, asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I smoothed the fabric of my coat and smiled a genuine, warm smile that reached my eyes. "Take me to the Haven Project," I said softly. "We are breaking ground on the new shelter for domestic abuse survivors today. I want to be there to turn the first shovel of dirt." The car pulled away from the curb, merging seamlessly into the flow of the city. I did not look back. I had a life to live, an empire to build, and a future that belonged entirely to me. Revenge was sweet, but freedom was exquisite. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment down below and let's chat about what you thought of Elara's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next one.